Welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams Birch, and this podcast, it exists for you. Whether you're a music lover, an educator, a choir member, each week we bring guests to the show to help explore what matters in music. I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome to the show. Hello and welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams Birch, and I need to pull the microphone closer. Thank you so much for listening. This is episode 60 on the podcast, and man, do I have something super special for you today. You are about to talk to Elizabeth Sue. Elizabeth Sue is a writer. She's the founder of Monday Vibes. She is a female-focused perfectionist expert. Now, before you flip to the next podcast, which is okay if you choose to do that, I really challenge you, my music people, to listen to this episode on the definition of perfectionism and ideas for personal growth that will lead you to your strongest, most powerful, most resilient self. Forget being your best self. That's all tied into perfectionism. But don't let me give that away. I want you to hear that directly from Elizabeth. This is definitely one of those conversations that I feel is going to fill our souls as we go into the summer vacation. Speaking of which, this episode 60 will be a slight pause in the Music Ed Matters podcast. Not that I'm not loving doing an episode every week. I just want to actually take an intentional break so I can come back to you super excited about what's coming in the fall. Don't worry, we're still having Teacher PD weekend in July in Savannah, or virtually check things out over at patreon.com/musicedmatters. You can still reach me, emilybirch.org/contact. And of course, this episode is brought to you by our friends at the Kinnison Choral Company, and you can find all of their great resources while I take a short little break at emilybirch.org/sponsors and click the KCC logo. Without further ado, my perfectionist friends, let's learn all about this with my dear friend, Elizabeth Sue. Today on the Music Ed Matter podcast, we are welcoming one of my newest friends, Elizabeth Sue. Hello!
Hi!
I'm so excited to talk to you. The story of how we connected is kind of hilarious. So, your husband, Andrew, showed up at Run Club.
Mm-hmm.
He's super personable.
Aww.
And fast. Let's just throw that out there, that he's really fast, but he ran with me and kept me company, even though he could blow my doors off. Super sweet. And then he brought you the very last day you guys were in town, but I felt like we all knew you because he was telling us you were writing a book, and I'm so excited we finally connected.
Oh, me too. I know. I wish I came earlier.
It's fine, but you guys are on a cross-country adventure. Tell us who are you, and give the listeners a story. Introduce yourself.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I am Elizabeth, and I am a writer, a perfectionism expert, and the founder of Monday Vibes, which is a personal growth newsletter and network for women. And my husband, Andrew, and I were in New York and Manhattan at the start of the pandemic. I had just finished my master's degree at Columbia in clinical psychology, and I was loving the New York creative scene, and just life unfolded in unpredictable ways, and we decided to change our plans and become digital nomads. So we left Manhattan July and have been on the road ever since, spending usually a month at a time in different cities across the country.
Okay, so you're in Asheville now. I know you went from Savannah to Charleston. Where else have you been?
So we started in Montana, and then we went right at the base of Glacier National Park, which was so fun because that was right after we had left New York, and I was really craving space and nature and scenery. And we were in this tiny little town where the population was less than the population of our apartment building in New York. So I was loving that. It was quite remote though. And from there we went to Park City, Utah, and then spent some time in Moab, which is so magical. Then we went to Denver, and then back to visit my folks in Michigan. then that was Savannah, and then
Mm-hmm.
Charleston, Raleigh, Asheville, and then we'll head back west in the summer.
Wow, that is so cool. So are you guys able to work remotely? I know Andrew's job is remote.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, my job is fully remote as well.
So tell us about, what does it mean to be a perfectionist expert? As coming from the musical field, I know that a lot of people listening right now are like, oh, I'm a super perfectionist. What does it mean to be a perfectionist expert?
Yeah. So, great question. Because a lot of times I feel like, myself included, like it took me a long time to accept that I was a perfectionist. I feel like a lot of perfectionists by nature don't want to admit that they're a perfectionist. They're like, I just have high standards and I like expect everything for myself, and like just they're trying to do my best, except the best is a moving target, and that is perfectionism. So I got into this work mainly to heal myself, which most of us, that's like how we find our purpose. And when I got to grad school, at that time, I had already, I had quit corporate. I had like been going to therapy, like really reflecting a lot on my life, my habits. And I had also started a life coaching business focusing uh, on working with women who were like myself, working in Silicon Valley, consulting, finance, and everyone who I worked with struggled with perfectionism, but it showed up in just having like a harsh inner critic, like being very self-critical, not necessarily like, oh, I want everything to be perfect. I care a lot. I feel like perfectionism often like there's judgment in that because we think of it as like very vain. Like I care a lot about my looks, or I care a lot about having like the car and the house and the family. And it's not that at all. Actually, the research says that it's when you have a conditional sense of self-worth. So you only feel good about yourself and you feel like you'll only be loved and accepted and approved of if you achieve a certain outcome, which I loved when I came across that definition because that rang so true. It's like, gosh, I really don't think that I care that much about what other people think, but in fact, being tied to achievement was a big aha for me. So, anyways, I kind of jumped the gun there. But when I got to graduate school, I studied. I actually studied burnout first, burnout in women, and from that research, I then explored the question of what's the role of perfectionism in burnout, because I saw the two really interrelated, specifically as it pertained to women and women of color. And from there, I have I love the work, and I've dedicated my career to helping heal that in all of us, and kind of dismantle the systems that perpetuate the issue.
I love that definition, that contingent. There's a condition by which you feel there's something, and that it's a moving target. That seems so real in a performance field too. I mean, so your background was in Silicon Valley. What did you do there?
I started out in sales, and then I moved to account management and spent some time in consulting, and it was always client facing. And yeah, and I traveled a lot, and I thought that it was like so cool and amazing. And it was in many ways, but then I got burned out. And then I realized that the system really rewarded, especially in like any client facing role, you are taught how to you're taught to just constantly throw yourself under the bus and put the client's needs first. And that was very detrimental to my own. I already had a tendency of self-sacrifice because I am a woman and because I am a woman of color, and all these things that set it up so that we live in a patriarchal society, and that experience in corporate really reinforced that, and it took a major toll on my health and well-being.
So did you find you didn't have the time to, or did you just not, were you not even aware that you weren't taking time for yourself?
Mostly I wasn't aware, mostly felt like it wasn't allowed, and that I would get fired or be demoted or not achieve the goals I set out for myself if I slowed down, which I write in my book and I talk a lot about, is partially correct. The way the reward system is set up, the way promotion schedules are set up, there is a favor towards that self-sacrifice. And in the burnout research, I learned about masculinity contest cultures because I really wanted to understand. There's a lot of research around burnout in physicians, or burnout in the medical field, burnout in teachers, not as much burnout in business or corporate, and which was odd to me, but it's because it's so valued. And the 4 norms that make up these, what the research calls masculinity contest cultures, which is it's what we all know, but it's these cultures that really perpetuate these issues. The 4 norms are: put work first, strength and stamina, dog eat dog competition, and show no weakness.
I feel like you're describing every musician listening right now.
So you're like, oh my gosh, no wonder it's like, I always say perfectionism, none of this, we weren't born with any of this. It's like we pick it up inside of these systems. We are intelligent beings. We figure out what is rewarded and what's not. And then we instill those beliefs onto ourselves, and we think, and that's where that inner critic comes from. It's not actually our voice. It's the voice of everyone around us, or the systems around us, so it goes from being overly critical or judgmental or having high standards, and then you self-policing.
Okay. So let's say the person listening realizes that they are in this perfectionism bubble. They are falling into one of those 4 norms that you've described. What's the first step out, and how do we shift and use personal growth to be our best selves without that perfectionism weight?
Yeah. So during my research, so once I learned about this whole idea of contingent sense of self-worth, or this idea of achievement playing a role in perfectionism, I wanted to I asked that question too, okay, what do we do? And I was sobbing when I read the research, because the antidote to that is self-compassion and unconditional self-acceptance. That is the tried and true, non-negotiable way of overcoming this. And I was like, oh my gosh, where was that when I was growing up? Where was that in the workplace? Why didn't anyone ever foster a spirit of compassion when I was struggling? I already had such high expectations for myself. And then I was tossed in all these environments, even the academic system, where there's a right and a wrong and like a better and a worse. And I like, no wonder we never feel good enough. And we don't even know what that good enough is inside our bodies. Like our intuition and our body awareness has been stripped away. And so that is why we overwork, because we don't even know. We're like, oh, I just have to do this thing. Or we've gotten so used to pushing ourselves because we've had to. And so self-compassion is the way to get out of it. And that is actually like extremely difficult to cultivate because we have so many other narratives that are much more popular. Like self-criticism is super popular, especially for women and women of color, because you have been told actually that you are less than, even if it's not directly, it's in that we still make like 80 cents on the dollar of men. Like that is value. So there are so many messages that say you do have to work harder. Like all things equal, you do have to prove yourself more. And so it's really exercising a new muscle. So it's both a deconditioning as much as it is learning a new skill.
Yeah, you're basically removing something while also adding something else. And it sounds like it's an up and down process. What are some of the ways that you can flex that muscle of self-compassion?
I love that. Well, part of self-compassion. So Kristen Neff is my favorite researcher. She's like the queen of self-compassion. And she describes self-compassion with 3 components. One is kindness towards oneself, which I think is the one that we're familiar with, like compassion towards the self. And then number 2 is a shared humanity, an understanding that all of us go through this. All of us are imperfect. All of us experience suffering. And in fact, suffering is to be expected in life. And so it's in understanding that you start to let yourself off the hook a little bit of, oh, it's not that I'm doing this wrong. It's that like I am having a horrible day.
Which is okay.
Which is okay. And then the third is kind of mindful awareness of your thoughts and feelings without judgment. And that's kind of the basics of mindfulness. It's so good, right?
That's the hardest one.
It's the hardest one, because what happens, right, when we are having a bad day, or we like bombed a presentation, or we like tripped over our words, whatever, then we're feeling bad about that. And then we're feeling bad that we're feeling bad. We're like, oh, I shouldn't feel bad. I should like be more grateful, or I should like not cry right now, or I should have prepared better so I wasn't even in this position. Then we ruminate, and then it's a whole thing. So
that spiral is real.
It's horrible. I mean, I'm like still spiraling of something like 3 days ago. It's horrible. And so part of self-compassion is that and when I think of like loving awareness, and I often, what's helpful for me that I'll describe to my friends, is I think about little E. I have like big E, which is like adult mom me, like mom meeting like mom to my little self. Because like, right, we're all trying to remother ourselves. I I think of like big E and little E, and I'm like, little E is like really having a hard time right now. Like big E can logically be like, this, it will be okay. But inside my body, I am reacting like I'm 3 years old. Like I'm either like having a tantrum, or I am like so scared my friend not texting me back means that like we'll never be friends again, or like I'm so stupid, or it's really extreme, some of these things. And there's a lot that goes into that, but I find it's helpful to separate ourselves a little bit and like hold space for like the little one that's like, actually, this does suck. Like,
Yes. Oh, I love that. And I'm going to steal the big E, little E, because I'm also an E. So the big E being my like self who can kind of show up and put on the game face and get it done, but acknowledging that little E exists.
totally. And like needs a different kind of nurturance. Like the little E is not going to be like cool with pushing through. Like she wants to watch TV or like play a game or go on a walk or cry or whatever. And we, as adults, like, yeah, I just think there's room to grow in terms of how we treat ourselves. Like, when I think about self-compassion, I really do think about how can I nurture that younger version of me that feels really sad or hurt right now. And, people talk a lot about inner child work and that it's similar. But I think that really is the part of you that gets triggered or hurt. And over time, when you do self-soothe, you do kind of build resilience and you start to heal. You're like collecting the little wounded parts of yourself, and we never know where they come from. Like it really could have been when you weren't invited to a birthday party. Like,
Your 4-year-old little E is having a hard time with that.
She's like, oh, like having FOMO, like all that stuff is so real. And I think validation is something that I have had to work extremely hard on, because essentially, when you're being self-critical and you're not having self-compassion, you're judging yourself for feeling a certain way, and you are invalidating your own feelings. And that is really a painful experience.
Sounds like it kind of piles up. But then I also love this big E, little E scenario, because you don't have to have a whole bunch of ideas. You just have to think, okay, if I was 5, what would I like to do? Go for a walk, go play with a friend, take a break, not go to the grocery store. And those are all things that are fine because you're still feeding you.
Exactly. I think that's, I love how you put it so simply, because what I really try and think about for this work is like, it's not a logical process. Like we try to talk ourselves out of different things. And I think often that's what shows up in a lot of these like self-help books or personal growth advice. But like your body, you're having an experience, like some sort of trauma is being activated, and that's not a logical, like it doesn't make sense. And so the more you try to make sense of it, the more like uncomfortable it can feel in your body. So just learning how to regulate your nervous system by like disrupting that, and often going out, spending time in nature, or like getting off your phone, or moving your body, doing something soothing. Those are all like
lots of great meditations on your Instagram. I'm guessing
Thank
those are
you.
TikToks too. I don't have a TikTok, but I do follow your Instagram like religiously because it's the bomb. But you have amazing meditations and reflections, especially as we go through social turmoil. And
Mm.
I think a lot of teachers, as we come down from the semester, there's almost a feeling of, okay, now where is my worth? My students are done for the semester. And what a great time to pause and instead of saying, I'm not doing anything of value anymore, looking inside and finding ways to build up, whether that's through play or meditation or getting with nature, or putting down the phone. I love this.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It's that kind of giving yourself space to just be is so hard. It's so
So
hard.
hard. I have the hardest time just being still.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, like quiet and still. Working on it. Working on it. It's a work in progress. So did you put all of this into your book? Like this is I feel like we could talk about this for hours, but is this what your book is on? How do you describe your book?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thank you. Yeah, my book has all of this. I felt like I didn't have enough space to actually share what I wanted to share and whether that's personal stories or research. And so I wrote it all down and I like had this creative spurt for probably a year straight. I just like wrote. And then I finished it and I am so excited to hopefully bring it out in the world. I'm still finding the right publishing path for me. But yeah, every chapter is kind of a lens into a different form of perfectionism via my life. And I look at, how it shows up in the workplace, how it shows up in academia, how it shows up in my relation or in your relationship with your body, in anxiety, in friendships, in
Mm,
relationships, in sex, in all, there's so many ways that we try to control ourselves to be someone and achieve something when, as you and I were talking about, it's going to be different for everyone. I feel like that's the thing that has taken me the longest to figure out for myself, that there are like no answers.
mm-hmm.
um,
It's a
but
constant
also
struggle.
like, yeah, just like trying to find what that like true path to liberation looks like.
For each individual one, it's so different. And I think we all go to school in a certain way. I think you did a story on this a few weeks ago or something about how, we just work really hard in high school to be the best. And then you go
Mm-hmm.
to college and you're working really hard to get to be the best. And then you go out into your first job and you're like, I'm still going to work really hard to be the best, even though no one out here is measuring it and no one really should care, just as long as
Yeah.
I'm doing what's best for whatever my product or service or people are in front of me. But that ruler and that yardstick, especially in academia, never really goes away. And getting comfortable with saying, that's okay that my path looks different, that's a tough place to get into. But I'd never related
Yeah.
it back to perfectionism. I love this thought process. I never, like, don't judge this. I've never really thought of perfectionism outside of work, but now that you're saying all these areas, like perfectionism in my relationship with my own body, like, oh my goodness, I have perfectionism in other places that I need to work on.
Yeah, I'm the same. I don't know that I would have put the pieces together myself either until I saw all the different studies. And I was like, oh yeah, eating disorder, that was me. Oh yeah, like anxiety, that was me. Oh yeah, workaholism, that was me. Oh yeah, sometimes micromanagement, that could also be me. And just the whole idea of being uncomfortable with the unknown and being uncomfortable with like feeling almost like it's so interrelated for me with intuition, like looking outside myself to make sure I'm okay.
Ooh.
And like, we're taught in the academics, and a lot of people will call it like academic trauma, the whole way it's set up, because it does teach you to rely on an external source to make you okay. And
Right.
yeah, and same with performance reviews once you get older, like, once you're in the workplace. And so my healing of perfectionism coincided with becoming an entrepreneur and being like, actually, I will set those standards for myself. And then I was like, oh shit, it's like the same. I'm doing the same thing to myself. And so like, yes, it can stem from other places, but once again, then it becomes internalized, and then it's your problem to deal with. And so just kind of taking those steps towards learning how to cultivate for myself a sense of feeling whole. And also like, even within the personal growth world, like just trying to be the best version of myself. Like, that is also a form of perfectionism. And I talk about that in my book. I'm like, actually, like the wellness industry, I'm just going to like poke holes everywhere, because like we're all guilty of it, and we're all falling for it. And it's all capitalism. And just like, it's amazing how many ways we are told every single day that like there's something wrong with us and we need to fix it. And so lately I've been joking with my friend, like we try to help each other kind of lower those expectations. And we're like have a mediocre day. Like I'm just trying to live my mediocre life. Like today I'm going to underachieve. Like, watch me. And, it's still really hard because I still hate when I mess up. I hate when I'm like late, or like if, I offend someone. As a writer, you're going to offend people. That's otherwise you're going to have boring writing.
Welcome to podcast world.
At
least they can like flip the pages, go on to the next podcast if it's not your thing, but don't take it out on us. We're just having a good time spreading information.
Yeah, I know. And it's like, art and creation is, that could be a whole nother podcast, but
oh yes.
like that, it's just really present to me how, how hard it is to like actually accept my flaws and my imperfections, and accept those in others.
So you're saying something so huge here, in that maybe the first step, other than acknowledging it, is accepting that you're going to have flaws and you're not perfect and others around you aren't either. And to bask in that, I mean, I know that's the daily show up. You said a second ago, show up every day as your best self. So when my therapist is the bomb, and she gets the perfectionist problem that I am, and the A-type personality, like she doesn't even give me assignments anymore, because she's like, you're doing all the assignments. You don't have to do all the assignments. I'm like, yeah, I did them all, every single one of them every day. Thank you. So she's taken that away. But what's so cool is she started asking me early on, like, why do you want to show up as your best every day? What does that mean? Define that. And I was so like, I just want to be my best. Like, how does that not make sense? I want to be my best every day. I want to show up better every day. And then it hit me. That was the problem. Because yes, I want to show up, but I want to show up and be resilient, so that on those days that I am like a powerhouse, we celebrate the powerhouse day. And on those days that I am a basket case, because it happens, but that part doesn't go on social media. No one sees those things. without oversharing, which I think is a great Brene Brown quote. What is it, like vulnerability without boundaries is oversharing.
So
And
good.
you have to talk about boundaries because this episode 60, is going out June 1st, and I'm setting myself a little summer vacation from the podcast, not because I don't want to record more, but because of you and boundaries. So talk about the power of boundaries for personal growth.
Oh my gosh, boundaries are my favorite because they are so hard for me. Because once again, like part of perfectionism is people pleasing. And I really struggle with that. And because of that, I work too much and I self-sacrifice and I put everyone's needs in front of my own. And so like I have had to work on boundaries like hugely. So I do care a lot about them. And yeah, I think they're really important and really hard. I think people talk about boundaries like just say no, and it's like actually in practice it's like
So much harder.
So like it makes my palms sweaty just thinking about it. Like I have had to say no in huge ways to my family lately, and it's been very uncomfortable and they are not cool with it. And yet at the same time, I need space and I need to prioritize my mental health. And right now that doesn't include them. And I've had to, and then on the flip side, I've had friends that have had to set boundaries with me of like, how much capacity they have as well. And so it kind of goes both ways, both in learning how to set healthy boundaries and stand up for yourself. It's a form of self-advocacy and mental health. And then also learn how to tolerate and withstand the discomfort that comes with people setting boundaries with you.
You've said the discomfort word again. It is going to be uncomfortable to break down your perfectionism and to set boundaries and to grow ultimately. It's just like you gave the muscle example earlier. Just like when a muscle is growing, it hurts when you are sore.
So true.
I'm going to blame Andrew. There was one run that we ran so fast, and I was sore for a solid 24 hours. Let him know I'm hanging at those paces now more consistently. It was one of his early runs with us, and I was dying. But muscles have grown back stronger. I think the uncomfortness, like that's a big thing to take away. It's going to be uncomfortable.
Yeah. And, really preparing for that, especially if you're someone who has had loosey-goosey boundaries in the past, like the relationships you've cultivated to date are aware of that, whether conscious or unconscious. So they will likely either be upset with you or they'll try and take it away. Like they'll be, like the friend who you're like, hey, like was like hoping I would be up for dinner tonight, but like I'm not. Like I'm not feeling up to it. And they're like, no, like I was really looking forward to it, and it's like sweet, but also like secretly not respecting your boundaries. Like they'll be like, oh, but like, what about like if we push the time back, or like, what about like tomorrow, and same thing with business opportunities. They'll like put on this like urgency, like, oh, it'll be like really quick, or, oh, like you'd be doing us a huge favor, or, oh, like not sure that we'll have the opportunity to do this in 2 weeks, and really trusting that like in this moment, my body is saying no. And so like, there's a way to say it that's like totally kind. And if like the thing falls through or you lose a friendship, I have lost many friends. That's where the resilience comes in. Like you will be okay, and you will grow, and things will shake out in a way that will be even better than you imagined.
I saw a really good quote this morning. One of my favorite runners posted a quote about how if you're not showing up your most authentic self, you're going to attract the wrong kind of people. So
Yeah.
show up as yourself so you can attract the people you're supposed to attract.
Mm.
Like, that's such a big thing to stop and like, hold on, am I showing up as me today? Like, that's part of it too. And if you're not taking this time, like you're talking about, to cultivate what's going on with little e, then you can't show up. And especially when, I mean, we're talking to teachers who have, 100 plus in their rooms at a time with these choirs and different ensembles. Like, really taking a second to think, is this a good boundary for not just myself, but my students and my choir as a whole? There's so many applications of that boundary.
Yeah, and what I love is, and I do a lot of coaching with students. I do executive functioning coaching, and we work a lot with emotional regulation. And in session, we model what that looks like for our students, and we model prioritization, and we model time management, and in that modeling, the students learn. And so I think that's something else that is really important. And I think Brené Brown talks about this too, where it's like you can't change other people. And like at the end of the day, all you know is how you're feeling. And when you show up as yourself, and when you're, striving to like be a leader, by being a leader, that means that you model what you want for yourself, and then by default your kids will realize like, oh, that's what a boundary looks like, and sooner or later they will implement that in their life. And there's a cool ripple effect to actually, you don't have to do anything but like be yourself and like keep working on yourself. And I think that's really cool.
I love that application to the teacher world and just leadership, and it all ties together. We've really covered perfectionism, how to grow personally, how to have power through all of this, to then, holy smokes, cause a ripple effect just by showing up as you. I feel empowered. This is amazing. I'm so thankful for your time. Before you go, I always let the guest share one thing that really matters, because it's called the Music Ed Matters podcast. So what's the one thing that really matters that you want the listener to walk away from this episode with, other than you should listen to this a few more times over to make sure you got it all? But what's the one thing?
I think that I've been, as a writer, and as someone who's been dealing with a lot of rejection lately, I feel like it's important for people to really believe that their voice and their feelings are valid, important, and matter. And whether that's in side conversations that you have, or things that you write, or art that you put out in the world, or the work that you do, that it all serves a purpose, and you are entitled to whatever experience you're having, and to give yourself space to feel whatever you're feeling, and to know that that's okay.
I am feeling very, very thankful that we got this time together, and I'm so eternally grateful that our paths crossed. I'm going to probably listen to this a few more times, not just when I edit it, but consistently, as I know this is something I'm dealing with. Thank you for sharing you and all of your research.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on the show. And it was so fun to reconnect. I feel really grateful our paths crossed, and I'm grateful for the work that you do in the world.
Well, thank you. Let us know when the book gets published, because I'm gonna have to like tell the universe. I want first copy. Like, I'm gonna be buying. Just let me know.
Okay, done.
Wow. I really hope that you enjoyed that conversation. I know this is one that I will bookmark and listen to over and over again, because y'all, we live in a perfectionist world, and that's okay. But I think the power to look at what Elizabeth called your big E and little e, because both of our names start with E. Whatever your name starts with, use those letters. But that power to look at the little e and what the little e needs, so that you can be okay with that and fill that and come back more vibrant and in whatever resilient capacity you need to be. And if you're living up to someone else's ruler, go burn the ruler. Make your own. You are doing amazing things. You're the only you that exists on this planet. So throw out all those crazy expectations and just show up the person you're meant to be in your authentic self. I really can't wait to hear what you think about this episode. Shoot me a message. Do something on Instagram. I don't know. Give me a like or follow in the in the Apple Podcast. I think if you do a review, it's good for us. I don't know. It's episode 60, and this is my friend Elizabeth Sue, and I'm taking a short little summer vacation, so I will be back shortly. But in the meantime, let me tell you really, really well. You matter. We all know that music matters. And I'll see you next time on the Music Ed Matters podcast.